Hello everybody, welcome to the Everything I Need to Know About Life I Learned from Supervillains panel. My first ever clapping applause. My name is Eneasz, Brodski, I'll be your moderator, and these are your panelists. Please introduce yourselves one at a time, and also, since I always think the introductions are kind of the boring part, throw in also for us, if you could be a villain, which one would you be?
Okay, Rob Weiner, popular culture / humanities librarian at Texas Tech University. I also teach a couple of classes related to popular culture, including superheroes, where we have a unit on the supervillain. And with Rob Peaslee here, we've both just come from the Joker panel, and we've both just published the very first academic study of a single supervillain on the Joker, called The Joker, a serious study of the Clown Prince of Crime, which is available at the Barnes & Noble booth, which will be after this panel if you want to come over and check it out. If I could be a supervillain, oddly enough, it would not be the Joker. However, it would be Magneto. And various reasons, which I will explain if anyone wants to know later.
I'm Rob Peaslee, and I'm also from Texas Tech University, where I chair the Department of Journalism and Electronic Media. Co-edited a volume on Spider-Man and a volume on the Joker that Rob just mentioned. And I teach courses related to film and visual culture, as well as courses on screenwriting and television writing. And if I were to be a supervillain, I would be Rob Weiner.
My name is Alexis Vandenberg. I am the president of Rapid Fanboy Marketing and Promotions. I put myself out there as the marketing supervillain for fandom. I'm also the co-owner of the Supervillain Radio Network, and I am one of the original contributors to the Evil Overlord list. And if I would be a villain, I would be me.
Hey everybody, I'm Amalie Howard. I am primarily a young adult author. I write for Harlequin Teen, Angry Robot Books, and Skyhorse. My last book is an Eneasz pick. It's about an East Indian reincarnated goddess. If I had to be a supervillain, I would be She Who Shall Not Be Named.
Hey, I'm Stephen Graham Jones, and I always know I'm in the right place when there's like a wall of weapons over there. I write novels, mostly horror. I've got 15 novels, 6 collections out. I just sold a werewolf novel to William Morrow. I live out here in Boulder. And if I could be a villain or a supervillain, which one? Either? Oh man. A supervillain, I think I would prefer to be Dr. Doofenshmirtz.
Okay, so we're convening this panel because we think that villains get a bad rap. They are often stunningly successful in life, and if it wasn't for all the heroes punching them, we could see that. They find a way to gather a lot of resources to inspire and motivate legions of followers, and they often almost conquer the world. Now, these are not easy feats, and to pull this off, you need some really admirable traits. I would like to know from each of the panelists, what is the most admirable trait of a villain that you like the most? And it can be the villain that you want to be, or someone else, if you named a real-life person.
I think it's having a good tailor who can make all your henchmen match, you know? So that's really important.
I think it's the complete lack of empathy.
Yeah, that's an admirable trait.
Sometimes, I think that, I like that, and not admirable in the sense that it's something good. I just like if I'm looking at a supervillain and trying to understand why they're the villain, the lack of empathy for me is one of their leading traits.
So you sometimes feel like you're being held back by other people, by their judginess, and you want to just say, I don't care.
Sure, I'd like to say that a lot of times.
I say it often.
I'm sitting next to this guy's scaring me. Come over here. Supervillain dude over here.
I would have to say that, unlike heroes want to establish and enforce the status quo. They always want the status quo. And the reason that villains are remarkable is that they challenge the status quo, and they consistently challenge the status quo. Heroes might have morals. They have that on us. You know what they don't have? They don't have work ethic. Villains have work ethic.
You kind of stole my answer, because I do really appreciate that fact about villains, that they are revolutionary in some ways, that they and as characters, speaking as somebody who thinks a lot about pop culture and so on, they challenge us to think beyond the given in some ways, and I think that's one way that we can rehabilitate the villain as a character type, is that they do provide us opportunities to think about different ways of being and thinking, even if they ultimately lose. We still have the germ of that thought, and I think that's powerful.
Going on what you said about the work ethic, I think the tenaciousness of the villain, no matter how many times, whether it's the Joker or, being defeated by Batman or whatever, or Magneto and Professor X, or
Coyote.
Yeah, Wile E. Coyote, Superman, Luther, Jesus and Satan. You can't keep a good villain down. They're still going to get back up and go after it, what they want. So there you go.
I would also have to say that we're not revolutionary. We are evolutionary.
That's better.
Evolutionary.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
We challenge the status quo, and we challenge each of you to go, you know what? Society is wonderful. But we want society in our image. And this is the face that we want in society. I know, but it's so pretty.
So you were saying that villains tend to be much more proactive, whereas the heroes are very reactive, and they're just trying to stop the villain from doing their thing. And you mentioned that the villains keep working at their plans constantly. They can't be kept down. What are some of your favorite plots that villains have enacted? And where would we succeed where they had failed? What made the plot not quite work correct?
Oh, man.
Would you like to start?
I'll put mine out there first.
Okay.
The best supervillain plot, and it was successful, was ensuring world peace. Only at the expense of destroying New York.
Yeah, Adrian Veidt.
Okay.
I like, talking Phineas and Ferb, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, I like how, I don't like, it messes up all his plans, but he always builds that self-destruct button on all of his machines, And I think if he just wouldn't do that, he could win.
You know what you do? You make the self-destruct button a booby trap.
Yeah.
They push it, and it kills the person that pushed the button.
That'd be good.
Straight from the evil overlord list.
And fulfillment.
Huh?
Sword.
That's true. Sword.
Funny thing, we've never asked about that little red button on the bottom of the gun.
Right. Any plots that you're particularly big fan of?
Well, there are so many that I can't think of any right now. They're going through my head.
I thought you were going to talk about the Joker's trying to kill Batman and Robin on the moon.
Oh yeah, I love that story. Yeah, I think it's Detective 383, but I may be wrong. If that is correct, I'm a terrible geek. But yeah, it's one of my favorite stories. Is when the Joker, it's so campy, it's wonderful, tries to kill Batman and Robin on the moon. So he somehow devises this fake moon, model, but somehow initially convinces Batman and Robin that they really are on the moon, and they figure it out, and of course, defeat the Joker. Now, where he went wrong is that he really shouldn't have built a model, but actually sent them to the actual moon. And of course they would have suffocated, and he would have been king of Gotham.
This next question, I want to start over on that side and come back this way. Villains seem to always just plain have more fun than the heroes. Is that important in a story when you're writing or reading a story? And is that important in life?
Yeah, I think what the dynamic that creates is that the hero is looking across the fence, and whether he or she admits it, they realize that Joker's out there laughing, having a good time, and Batman, every way he turns, there's a rule he can't break. So I think that dynamic is important because it casts the hero in more contrast, and the hero has to become aware that I kind of suck. That I'm boring. I think the villains, the bad guys, are always so much more exciting. That's how you when you're building a thriller or any kind of story. Really, you don't start out equipping your hero with a hammer, a sword, a special tiara, and all this stuff. What you do is you build the antagonist first. You build the bad guy, the bad girl, whatever it is, the supervillain, and you make that villain virtually unbeatable, and then you have to come up with a hero who can just have a 1% chance of taking that bad guy down, and that makes for a good story.
I kind of agree with Stephen in that, with the antagonist, you have to have, he has no rules. The supervillain has no rules. And in terms of society and life and stuff, you always want to have that person, you always want to be that person. I wish I could be like that guy who doesn't have to listen to their mom, or, supervillains have moms too, or anything like that. But then with the hero has to follow certain rules. There's certain parameters which he has to adhere to, and that's because that's all the tropes that go with the hero. The hero has to be a good guy. He has to save the world. He has to be of good moral character. Whereas the villain has more freedom. And I totally agree with him in that you have when you build your antagonist, the hero just has to find a way while remaining sort of true to the principles you've built around him to take down the supervillain. That was a really roundabout way of saying that, the good guy is bound by goodness, whereas the supervillain is not.
I think the most important thing you can take out of supervillainy is actually the passion. It's the passion. Because, let's just be blunt, Lex Luthor could sit in Lex Tower and make a couple of more $1 billion every year and not mess with Superman. And not control Metropolis and, be on his merry way. Their vision is overriding so much of their life because they're passionate about it. They want to win. And they also want to be proven to be right. It's why the Joker doesn't kill the Batman with a gun, because he has to prove himself right. And he has to prove himself the superior man.
It's ego, right?
It is all ego. And that's not a bad thing. Ego is to claim for oneself. Arrogance is to claim for oneself. So to say, I claim this, I was right, is overriding, and it is a passion that in life can take you anywhere you want to go. And it's something where, in going forward, what do most creatives, what do most captains of industry say? Do what you're passionate about. I would argue that most of the people who shape our society are in fact villains. They're just villains with really great press. And I have to appreciate that.
Or publicists with the morals. They don't have.
Or they hire me.
Right.
I agree. That's the way you explain that. It made me think that Michael Jordan embodies all the good qualities of a villain. He's all ego. He wants to kill his enemies. He wants to own the industry and everything. But we prize that in him. But if it's Megamind, we're like, somebody take him down, please.
Well, I think that adds the second part, which is you have to do it with flair. I'm sorry. If you're going to cross a line and you're going to be passionate about it, don't just timidly cross a line. Pole vault over that line, naked eating sushi. That's how you do it. How the Joker does it. It's how Lex does it. And it's worked pretty good for them so far.
Not all the James Bond villains, they're like that too. Goldfinger and all that. They're almost cartoon versions of themselves, but that makes us love them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we culturally, we set up this dichotomy between the hero and the villain, and we're sort of programmed, or we prefer to sort of identify with the hero, or at least we have for many decades. But I think that there's indications that that's changing culturally, that maybe we aren't quite so prone to that as we used to be. I think if you look at, and I was just talking about this in the Joker panel, if you look at the kind of characters that we are invited to identify with in popular culture today, and that we do identify with in popular culture today, like Walter White, like House of Cards, Frank Underwood, these are not heroes in the classic sense, and yet here we are identifying with them despite them doing villainous things. That's really interesting to me. I think that says something about our relationship to, this now fairly old trope of the superhero-villain kind of dichotomy and how it's evolving and so on.
Horror's been doing that for a while, because we all champion Jason and Freddy and Michael and Leatherface and Ghostface. We root for them in the stories, which is weird. I don't understand that, but I do it.
Right. Yeah.
Very true.
Or Hannibal.
So, based on what I've been hearing here about the new villainous heroes or heroic villains, is there any real difference between the villains and the heroes other than point of view? I recently read something that argued that in Firefly, which, by the way, amazing series, one of Joss Whedon's best, I love it,
Yay.
but that we were tricked into rooting for the bad guys. That really, we only hear from now that the Alliance sucks, and if you look at it, the Alliance rules through democracy and provides security and healthcare for people, and the planets they rule are pretty decent, whereas anywhere where the Alliance doesn't have control, it's a wasteland ruined by warlords and mafia bosses, where gangster criminals like the Serenity crew run rampant. And I thought that was an interesting point. Were we just rooting for them because they were the point of view characters? Is there anything that we can point to that says, this is what identifies you as a hero and this is what identifies you as a villain, where we could have known that, while we were watching the show?
Society. Only society.
Would you like to elaborate?
I would have to say that society in and of itself is what is the ultimate arbiter of what is a villain and what is a hero. We look at, for instance, let's take George Washington. George Washington is the American hero. He is the embodiment of the Republic. He is the man like Cincinnatus who actually left power. He's a wonderful hero. However, he was also a man who raised arms against his government, just or unjust, and essentially fought his own personal private war with a group of people who were not democratically elected at the time to say, you know what, we're doing it our own way. Honestly, again, you had a cabal of supervillains. You had, led by Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington.
Thomas Paine.
Huh?
Let's not forget Thomas Paine.
And Thomas Paine, a group of people who decided to get together in their evil lair and go, you know what, we're doing it our own way.
Yeah, it's like Wolverine said, I think in the first Secret Wars series, that terrorist is what the big army calls the little army.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the villain is definitely the hero of his or her own story. So if we are getting the story from that angle, then I think we're conditioned as an audience, as readers, to side with the person whose story we're hearing.
Yeah, in the screenwriting class I teach, the students always have a hard time with villains because they either they get just hamstrung by the notion of originality and they don't feel like they can come up with anything that hasn't been done before, which I completely, tell them there is nothing that hasn't been done before. But what really bugs them is that they tend to make them very one-dimensional and unrelatable and sort of cartoonish. And I tell them, nobody sees themselves as the villain. And I think that's a really important lesson in creation of text, but it's also a really important history lesson, right? Because people do horrible, villainous things, but they do them for reasons that make sense to them. So.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Just that I think there's a pretty fine line between heroes and villains, and I mean, it's like you said, it's a point of view, and it's from your way you interpret it. And I think, especially in fiction, we're seeing that more and more, where those lines are getting crossed, right? A villain that might have been described as, a supervillain previously now may have heroic qualities,
Absolutely. And I would actually go further and say that the only difference ultimately between a hero and a villain is whether or not the hero is enforcing the status quo, which defines him automatically as a hero, and a villain is upsetting the status quo for his own ends, which is fine, because to be fair, if the status quo was actually beneficial to everybody, he really wouldn't care that much anyway.
You know, Conan is interesting in that way, because Conan, he's always a thief and a mercenary, and he always gets in these bad situations because he wants to steal the egg of Cathar or something, you know, and which is somebody else's. He shouldn't be stealing that, but then he fights a giant snake, and we're like, well, that's pretty cool. You know?
I love Conan's lines that the definition of happiness is to see your enemies driven before you and hear the lamentations of their women. So when you write villains, do you prefer your villain to be really likable and relatable, or do you want him to be someone that the reader or the viewer can hate?
In my story, I think that when I created the villain, she had the idea of going for a greater good. So she wanted to kill a little bit of people for what she perceived to be the greater good. And so she is likable, and her goals are attainable. They are, you know, there's something to be said for the goals that she had, you know, sacrifice the little to save the many. And I like, when I create my villains, to have them you know, push questions to the reader that you might answer differently. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily make you bad or good, but, you know, from a villainous perspective, she's bad because she's trying to kill my hero. But, you know, at the same time, she is fighting for something that she, in her mind, thinks is bigger for the safety of her people. So she's a big alien, and, yeah, she wants to kill all humans. And the protagonist sees value in our survival, basically.
You know, I guess, I mean, it depends on the tone of the story you're telling. For me, like, I've got one novel, The Last Final Girl, a slasher, where the obvious bad person, the slasher, puts on a Michael Jackson mask and calls himself Billie Jean and goes around and kills everybody. And we know he's bad, he's not likable at all. But I've got another story where it's the priest, and the priest is kind of a nice, smart dude. You know, I mean, and that's a more serious novel. And so, I mean, I think it just depends on the tone of the story, whether you want your villain to be likable or pathetic or anything, or kind of caricature.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that I think there are some cases where it's not an either or. I think you can do both. I think your villain can be likable, but also be likable in a very particular sort of way. That take Voldemort for example, right? Voldemort's actually pretty charismatic.
He's awesome,
right? It doesn't mean you like him, but you like when he's on screen, or you like when you're reading about him, but you still cheer when, spoiler alert, he doesn't win, right?
No. What?
So, I don't know, I think you can do, and you shouldn't always try to do both. I think there are cases where, just a cartoonishly evil, but really well done villain, the defeat of that character can be, really like invigorating and awesome. But there are other characters that really do invite that empathy, and that their struggle is actually central rather than their evilness.
And a good example of that is Loki. I want to take him home.
Ross was talking about Magneto, and Magneto, I always want to side with Magneto because he's a good dude.
Fighting for his people's rights.
Yeah, well, me too.
Absolutely. I was actually going to point out that ultimately, Magneto is the person that, from a socioeconomic standpoint, is the person who is trying to uplift an oppressed minority, and is doing so against an overly repressive regime. You can look at, frankly, Charles Xavier as being the ultimate defeat of a sociological class, because integration means loss, especially if how would you limit creativity or intelligence or athletic ability or anything in terms of, let's say that you, back there, you, right there, yeah, you're an incredible artist, okay? You're an artist that is above any other artist ever. Yet society is going to say that because of your superior art. We're going to actually have to take you down to the level of everyone else. That is ultimately what Charles Xavier's message is don't stand out. Don't be you. Don't be magnificent. Be ordinary. Assimilate. Blend in. Now, I don't know which one of you here wants to blend in. I'm pretty sure at Comic-Con there are not many. I honestly think that there are more people here who are of the villainous persuasion of, no, I am here, I am important, and I matter, and my talents matter. And that is a singularly villainous and beautiful thing.
Well said.
Well, and I
Let's
think
go out and create mayhem.
yes. That piggybacks onto this idea that, villains are extremely complex. I mean, the example that I like to use is, I know the movie's terrible, but bear with me, okay? Or at least most of it is terrible. Spider-Man 3, the Sam Raimi. All right. Sandman does not, rob or kill anyone for evil purposes, right? He does it to help his children. Okay, that's his motivation. It just so happens things happen. It's against the law, but he needs the money. So he goes and does it. It's very complex. Magneto is very complex. Villains are very complex. And, Stan Lee always talked about how difficult it was and how necessary to create the villain for the story each month. And that was the defining factor. A hero is only as good as the villain. And the villain is what's interesting. The other thing I want to point out, and I'm sorry if I'm going to offend some of you, but the coolest character in Star Wars is who?
Darth Vader.
Or, the coolest character in The Phantom Menace was who? Darth Maul. Darth Vader. I wonder why that is.
I guess what you're saying is that so Sandman was essentially what Jean Valjean and Les Miserables was stealing for his kids. And I guess in the same way we could say Galactus is doing that too. He's just trying to feed himself. He's going from planet to planet, and he does wipe out civilizations and species, but he's not evil. He's just hungry,
No, he's not evil. And Mr. Fantastic understands that and understands that Galactus serves a purpose within the universe. And as a result, it's a very convoluted storyline. We won't go into it, but, he's put on trial and,
Well, I would also point out that I wouldn't put in Spider-Man 3 at least, I wouldn't put Sandman as a villain. Sandman is not a villain. In fact, if anything, unfortunately, I hate to put it this way, Sandman hasn't broadened his horizons. Because instead, he has now the power to actually, go out and actually impact the world. He still just wants to save his child. He should want to save every child. He should want to actually change the world. And that's actually what makes the villain, is that need to impact the world. That need to say that we exist.
What's that selfishness, right? I think it's a selfishness.
I wouldn't even call it selfishness. I would call it
Back to ego.
Ego, but I would also say that we know better. And if we actually are able to say, gee, we want to build a better society. We want to build a society that is going to, benefit, my people.
But you don't ever have like a quiet villain. You always have a villain who wants to shout it from the rooftops that they've achieved X, Y, or Z, or saved their people, or we're the best. And
why would you want to be quiet?
right, that's what I'm saying. So it's back to selfishness and ego.
Well, but that kind of speaks to one of the downfalls, right? Which is the monologue, right?
Do not rant, be monologue.
Right. Don't monologue, right? You'll get so much more done if you just don't monologue. But also that there are many things that villains could do in these stories quite successfully if they just stayed under the radar. So it's not just about fulfilling the objective.
No,
right?
no.
Because if it were,
Right.
It's also about proving that you are right and that you are ultimately the better.
And that you get credit.
I
You're
think
the
villains
greater
want validation. Absolutely.
Yes.
It's all about the validation. You have to have it.
So their strength, one of the things that drives them forward, this need to achieve, also ends up being a large flaw in the villain.
Just like a hero.
Sometimes their only vulnerability. Right?
Well, that was going to be my next question, is what is, for the villains you like most, the biggest flaw that you think leads to their downfall, that kept them from defeating the hero and ruling the world?
Good crisis communication. They need better press.
Which is why they need to hire you.
Which would help me a lot.
Their flair for the dramatic often gets them in big trouble. You know, James Bond's nemesis never kill him right there. They always lock him in the room and die. You know, dramatically, slowly, and everything. Where's that? You know. So yeah, I think that the theatrics that they insist upon never helps.
I think Darth Vader should just kill Luke. He would have been fine. Just kidding. No, but he's attacked by a crisis of conscience. So maybe to be a better villain, he had to be, less susceptible to that. God, I feel evil.
Join the dark side.
Just relish it.
Do it.
Just relish it. Bathe in it every day.
This guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how you describe a good villain. I mean, is a good villain one that works as a character? Because I would say that empathy, it does make a good villain, right? Because it makes them interesting and complex. But if a good villain gets things done, that they set out to do, then yeah, empathy gets in the way of that.
It's flat, right?
Yeah,
That's what you think.
yeah. But it can be, yeah. And so in story terms, it wouldn't necessarily make for a better story if they just did what they needed to do to, pursue whatever goal they had. For me, I mean, obviously we spent a lot of time the last couple of years thinking about the Joker, and a lot of it has to do with, as far as the Joker goes, with his relationship specifically with Batman. And, he's got many, 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 many opportunities to just simply kill Batman, but can't do it because Batman is his reason for living. So to kill him would be essentially to annihilate himself. There's also the personal relationship angle with some of these characters too that gets in the way beyond any sort of generalized sense of empathy.
Well, I would actually say that, again, you can't kill them because you want them to admit you are right. That's ultimately what it is. It's not Batman. It's not the fact that the Joker can't kill the Batman. It's the fact that the Joker wants the Batman to go, you know what?
Okay. He wants him to kill him. The Joker wants Batman to kill him to break his rule.
Or ultimately to turn to the Joker's methodology. Why is the Joker such a slap in the face to the Batman? It's because his very thing that, these morals do not exist. Your idea that in a world where life can be snatched away, life doesn't exist. In a world where freedom can be snatched away, freedom does not exist. Thus, nothing exists except for ultimately me. He wants the Batman to admit that. And if the Batman can't, that's why the Batman who is rigid order, looks at that and says, his life is the ultimate bad joke. The Batman's life is an ultimate bad joke. He would actually prefer the Batman to go, you're right. It's all a bad joke. And probably join him. And then kill him. That's beside the point.
So the point of this panel was to try to uncover something useful we've learned that we could only learn from the villain and not from the hero. I think we've kind of covered that, but does anyone have anything they want to add to that?
Yes. Never give up.
Never surrender.
Yeah.
I like the symbiotic relationship between the villain and the hero. And I think one thing that really strikes me when there's a really well-written villain is that villain and also the hero doesn't have meaning. Their life, there's no meaning to them, to their existence without the other half. And a good movie that kind of threw that on its head for me was Unbreakable, where at the end he's like trying to find the meaning, like what's the purpose of his life when every bone breaks in his body, and when he finds, Bruce Willis's character who just doesn't get sick. It was just like, I just thought it was really amazing. Like they meet each other.
I agree with Ron. It's never given up. I was thinking my favorite supervillain moment ever, and this is the second time I'm going to reference Secret Wars. I really have more references, but this just happens to be Secret Wars. It's in number 10 or 11 of the first series where Dr. Doom is fighting the Beyonder, and the Beyonder is this omniscient, super powerful being, and Doom's going against him, and the Beyonder cuts off Doom's leg and his arm. Doom is dead as can be, but he keeps fighting. And I remember when I was in 6th grade when I read that, I thought that's how you do it. You don't stop. Keep going. And Doom finally does take Beyonder's power, and he gets what he wanted. He gets that trophy he wanted because he didn't give up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you do it with passion. Do it with the ego. Do it with the flair. And stay true to your vision. Stay true to your vision. When I started Rabid Fanboy Marketing Promotions, I'm pretty sure everybody thought I was completely insane.
Now they know you are.
Now they know I am. Yes, but I own it. But in doing so, I built a marketing and promotions company that helps creatives and gets their message out, gets their work out. And that's something that just stay true to your vision. And that is a very villainous, almost singularly villainous trope. Because you have to. You're the only one that holds that vision against an entire society. And that has to be your rock.
Yeah, if the villain dies because her vision intact, then they're winning, really. They haven't achieved. Yeah.
We're going to throw this open to questions. If anyone has... Wow. Okay, I'll start here at the front.
Dr. Horrible.
Yeah, love Dr. Horrible.
Was his downfall altruism or hubris?
I would actually have to say that his failure was actually probably more of the fact that he had his vision was fundamentally a flawed one in which he felt that he had to be that isolated being, rather than actually trying to incorporate the love of his life into his plans, and actually be, frankly, more expansive. He should have, frankly, recruited and gone from there.
I think one of Dr. Horrible's flaws was his inability to get over what other people thought of him. I think his desire for approval from Bad Horse really brought him down. And if you could have just said, I don't care about your evil League of Evil, I'm going to go conquer the world my own way, you would have done better.
Absolutely.
Is Dr. Horrible Doogie Howser?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer.
Okay. I'm taking your seat then.
Is there a difference between villains and plain old bad guys? What makes Voldemort a villain? Dolores Umbridge, the big professor? Just somebody that's really mean that you love to hate? I don't think that she's...
Yeah.
She's a minion.
She's a flunky. Yeah.
She's a flunky.
I think it's, for me,
Success.
it's the difference in robbing the bank or bringing down financial institutions. It's a matter of scale and scope of your vision.
Vision. Yeah.
And
It's
the
a difference.
strategy, right? The big guy, the big thinking guy. He's the big picture guy. She's like,
She's a minion.
yeah. And
It's-
she puts in different, sorry, you go.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, I was agreeing with you. It's ultimately Sandman. It's the difference between Sandman and Dr. Octopus. Sandman does not have a vision. Sandman is just a bad guy. Dr. Octopus wants something. He plans. He enacts. He engages. He brings people in. He builds the Sinister Six when he wants to take down Spider-Man. He has a vision. Sandman is just a flunky. He's just a bad guy. Dolores Umbridge would be quite happy sitting in an office.
With her kittens.
Yeah, with her kittens, stamping out paperwork. She is, and in fact, the reason that people find her more distasteful than Voldemort is that myopic smallness. That's about her.
Yeah.
She's an HR.
She is the worst. She is the worst kind of person because she's banal.
Villains are inspiring.
Yeah.
Mine was about minions too. They're kind of the backbone of a lot of villains. So, what would you say is like the best set of minions to have?
The best set of minions to have.
The little yellow kind.
Yeah, the yellow, the one.
The kind that you never run out of and you can kill anytime you want.
I would actually, I'm going to go back to my quote from the Evil Overlord list, which is this. When you have your armies of evil, what you do is that you bring in your chief lieutenant, and then you ask him, amongst your minions, which ones have actually, shown some disloyalty, maybe complained a little too much, and so on. And after you kill all the people he's listed, you kill your lieutenant, because if you ratted out his friends, how loyal is he?
I think even more so than loyalty, having had to try to coordinate things in the past, competence is amazingly important.
But
I'd rather
not
have
too competent.
I don't know. I'd rather have a very competent henchman than I would have a very loyal henchman. And if it turns out that they're more competent than me and they can take the mission forward better than I can, I'd step down because I don't want him to shoot me.
Well, then you wouldn't be a villain.
You wouldn't be a super villain.
I probably wouldn't be. I need more ego.
Yeah.
I think some of the most competent minions would be, like, if you want to terraform Earth, then release a whole plague of zombies, you don't have to, micromanage zombies, they just do their thing.
If they don't listen.
They're really smart minions in turn.
Okay.
Unless you put a kill switch in it.
But then the kill switch gets hacked. Yeah.
So a lot of you talked about how the villains are the ones who kind of rebel against society and the status quo. And then in a lot of newer dystopian stories, it's the heroes who kind of break society. And so how do you appreciate those villainous qualities being shown in protagonists?
Marvelously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the
Great question. Great question.
Yeah, it's really good. It's that the society is already broken, and that Katniss Everdeen or Triss or whoever can tell that it's broken. And so yeah, they do use villainous qualities to be heroes. It is a weird conversion.
I think maybe the difference is whether the society is good or bad. Because what we really bought into when we watched Firefly was that the Alliance is evil. And that's why we're okay with Mal and his crew being these outlaw, smugglers that don't do nice things at all, because the society they're rebelling against is even worse. And I think that is where that article drew me in when they pointed out, you're getting this entirely from Mal's point of view. The society isn't that bad. I think that's probably where a lot of villains that are more relatable go wrong. That we see them doing their thing and we think they're inspiring, but then we look at the society they're rebelling against and we're like, dude, chill out. This is not that bad a thing. You didn't have to kill this many people.
I would also point out that we look at the Empire and the Empire through the eyes of Leia and the Rebellion. If you look at the Rebellion and then you look at the Empire, you see prosperity, safety, security, and a rather well-funded, frankly spectacularly funded military. You have a rebel group that is trying to bring that all down. Now, honestly, they usually say the most horrible thing they did is they blew up Alderaan. Well, Alderaan is peaceful. It has no weapons. Why do we believe her? She's lied about everything else in the movie up to that point. Would you believe her? Oh no, this is a counselor ship. We're actually smuggling nuclear weapon plans to Al-Qaeda. I mean, that's essentially what she is doing. We're a counselor ship. I'm on a diplomatic mission. We're we're actually on Dantooine. No, they're not. We have no weapons. We're peaceful. Oh, yeah, I'm going to take your word for it now, of course. I also have a bridge in Brooklyn that I want to buy.
So this kind of celebration of villainy and dissolve and more compass in culture and non-dualism that we're seeing, it's kind of a moment that culture's in right now that I think some people call postmodernism maybe. I'm curious what kind of you can really come after that.
That's a very good question.
That's two good questions back to back right here. Yeah.
I really want to say
Gold
you know nothing,
stars.
Jon Snow, but I'll just let him. You dress as Jon Snow.
I think that these stories are always. I mean, we've had these stories for millennia, in one form or another, and so they're always products of their time. And I think that we should be Americans, the West, something like that, should be cognizant that our experience is partial, and our experience of popular culture today, as all-encompassing as it seems, is also partial. And not everyone is having a postmodern moment, right? The way that we are sort of in Western popular culture. That said, I do think that there is some real contemplation going on in media forms and genres that normally were reserved for playtime, right? I mean, we get some real vegetables with our candy these days when it comes to film, sequential art, things like that. Some weighty thematic stuff to consider. I was watching CBS this morning today with David Edelstein. Did anybody see this segment? And he was sort of talking about how Tomorrowland is such a refreshing thing because it's optimistic, right? As opposed to Divergent and these sort of post-apocalyptic Mad Max, which is I guess anything but optimistic. And he was sort of celebrating that and sort of criticizing popular culture at large for being so dystopian, being so sort of pessimistic. And I was sort of like, well, it's sort of beside the point. Like, it is what it is. And these movies get made, these books get published, these video games get produced because people are going to buy them because they resonate in some way. And I think it's important. This is one of the things that we talked about with the Joker book is like, why do these characters resonate so much today in our culture? And I think it's an important question.
I think it's also because I started watching The Walking Dead. Zombies scare me, except for warm bodies I was okay with, Shaun of the Dead I was okay with. But when I started watching The Walking Dead, I got addicted to this show, and it's the characterization, because I found myself wondering, what would I do in this scenario? And I actually was disgusted with my choices. Like, I wanted people to die, I wouldn't let people in. And I think, these things, as, Rob was saying, it kind of shows you, it makes you question how you would behave when you read a book that has those, that kind of scenario, or you watch a movie with that type of scenario. And I mean, sometimes it helps you find either what your level of empathy is or your humanity is. I don't know. I mean, it makes us question ourselves, and I think it's important.
Villains are unabashedly honest, to be fair, even the most tricky ones. Mm-hmm. I mean, we understand the depths and the heights that humanity can rise and sink to. I think that most society doesn't exist like that. They want to keep their blinders on. They like their blinders. They're comfortable with their blinders.
I did a panel a couple years ago on kaiju, and somebody was asking, why are there so many kaiju movies coming out? And I said, you notice that the first round of kaiju movies came after the war, when we were we were recovering from something, right? And it was almost like, the way I saw it from this, and I think it actually applies to villainy as well, okay, is that society and culture are cyclical. One of you asked what happens next, and the first thing that came to my mind was Bastille Day. Okay? So you have a revolution, and then you have a reformation, or you have a renaissance, and you have a reformation. And with every new generation, or in every new cultural expansion, you have new superheroes who are born, and new supervillains who are born, so that the cycle can continue.
We are out of time, so I gotta cut this off. Everyone, go out there, be awesome, don't kill too many people.
Thank you.